Anyana Timirandasya Yananjala Shalakaya Chakshurunmiritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Gurudev, welcome everybody. Now today we have the topic, surrender. And as Guruji said, surrender is the greatest, the first, and the final lesson from the Guru. So this is it. This is the topic. And I want you all to be prepared with your questions after I finish talking, because I know it's a theory for most people, and it's very hard to grasp what it means or how you actually do it, how surrender happens. And an analogy I used recently was, surrender means you acknowledge that the one that loves you the most is with you all the time. And, you know, he resides in our heart. God, the divine Guruji, is not something outside that you have to be searching for. And it's as if you're on a date. Your life is like a date with your greatest love. And if you're out on that date and you're busy on your cell phone the whole time, you're going to miss the lover who's sitting across from you. So what surrender does is it means you're putting the cell phone down and you're paying attention to that divine presence all the time. And this doesn't mean you become some kind of robotic cult droid. What it means is the one that created us is the only one who knows the grand adventure that we're supposed to be on. And everyone's adventure is different. And some people are supposed to be wacky, and some people are supposed to be brilliant. And everything is okay. But as long as you're one of the wacky ones trying to make yourself into some straight and narrow person, you're going to have trouble, because the divine didn't create you that way. The divine created you to be maybe the free radical in everyone's life. So when you surrender, what you're doing is you're, as Guruji says, let him be the chauffeur. Let him drive the car to get to your destination, because he's the only one who knows where you're supposed to be going. And I remember when I was younger, you know, I'd be watching these TV shows and reading magazines and trying to make myself conform to everyone's idea, you know, how I was supposed to look and how I was supposed to, you know, dress, and who, you know, there was this checklist of what I was supposed to do in life. And that's your mind trying to dictate to you. Whereas the divine, you know, is looking at me and going, no, you're a sannyas. You're going to be a swami. Of course, you know, when I was 20, that would have made no sense to me at all. But, you know, thank God for the people who do understand surrender at a young age, because they immediately are on the right path. And I think because of, I think there was a lot of karma for me to pay off, and a lot of experiences that were set up for me to have so that I could be of help when I got older. And recently Guruji said, when a leaf falls in the river, do you think the leaf knows where the stream will take it? Nope, nope, just let go. The wind is pushing the leaf. Similarly, we have the hand of God. So if you can keep that analogy in your head, that we're all moving on this beautiful river, and there is no way we know how it will turn out. And, you know, we might turn a corner and all of a sudden there's intense rapids or a waterfall that we will, you know, crash through. But it's okay, because it's a divine plan. We will crash through, but we will be okay. And at the end, we'll be exhilarated and go, wow, that was a great ride. And that's what I found in life, was when I got rid of these constraints that said how I had to be, and just started following intuition. Like when an idea would pop in my head that made me feel ecstatic, that to me was the divine going, yes, Whereas if someone said an idea to me and it made me feel heavy and depressed, that's no. So this Western philosophy of just push through it is crap. if if an idea is making you feel horrible and your energy drops immediately, that's no. That's Guruji sitting in your heart going, that is not the way to go. And when I was in Hollywood trying to sell my scripts, I thought that was the path I was supposed to be on. But the meetings were horrible. And to wash off that feeling after the meetings, I would go to Venice Beach in Los Angeles and find a homeless person and buy them coffee and ask them what their story was. Because as a writer, I wanted to have a project going on. So I wanted to write about the homeless. And I got happier and happier being with the homeless and less comfortable with the business. And one night my roommate was so frustrated with me and she said, oh, why don't you just go live with them and get it over with? And the exhilaration and the rush of energy was massive. And it's the first time in my life I had experienced that extreme reaction. And I knew that was God going, this is it. This is what you're supposed to do. And so, of course, she lost her mind. She said, I was kidding. I said, no, that's it. And I think that is the turning point for my whole life. That's when I started listening to that inner feeling, because no matter how strange the event was or my decision was, it always turned out great. It always made for my life to be better. And that's what I want everybody to start practicing, is how to take those little steps of trust. And it could be something menial. You get up in the morning and you say, what should I do today? And then listen, just listen for a feeling in your heart or in your mind. And it might be, oh, call this person or go for a walk, and you will end up running into somebody or something will happen as a result of that tiny little whisper. And the more you listen to the whispers, the louder they get. And the Guruji can't work with you one-on-one unless he knows you're listening all the time. And some of us get dreams of him, and some of us have no experience at all. And that's where he needs to know you're paying attention. If he knows that you're listening to every single little hint, then it gets louder and clearer and more precise. And I know in our culture, we are taught to be in control all the time. And my big surrender event happened. It was before I physically met Guruji, but I was already connected with Babaji. And I was in California, and some of you know the story. My husband was a Vietnam vet, and something broke in him, and he tried to kill us one night. And I ended up homeless with a baby. So my logical mind kept trying to come up with plans. If I do this, this will work. If I do this, this will work. And nothing worked. And finally, I was alone one night in this abandoned motel room. I had my baby in a box trying to keep him out of the rain. And the rain's pouring in under the door. And I just broke. I cried all night. And finally, I just said a prayer. And I said, if you're really out there, I give up. I don't know how I got here, and I don't know how to make it stop. And it stopped. Like there was no clap of thunder or white knight coming through the door. But in the morning, there was this intense stillness, and I realized that what had happened is my mind had stopped, because the situation was so beyond my comprehension. My mind couldn't come up with a solution. And that's what Guruji's telling us to do, is surrender the mind, and then he can drop in. And the next morning, there was this intense stillness, and I said, what should I do? And this tiny little voice said, call Jennifer. And she was a friend who had a son the same age as mine. And I went out to the phone booth and I phoned her, and she came zooming over, loaded us into her car and took us home. And I never looked back. Like, that was the end of the turmoil. I kept getting work. I kept finding places to house sit until we got our own place. It was like baby steps. And every day I would say, what do I do today? And that's what turned my life around, was I stopped thinking I was in control of anything. And then the next big event that sort of locked in that surrender was about a year later. I was still trying to get my husband some help. I wasn't living with him, but I was trying to get him into counseling, and we were trying to visit. And I wanted his son to know him. As, you know, when he was sane, he was amazing. And so this one day I was working in the greenhouses making topiaries, and my husband had our 2-year-old, and all of a sudden he snapped again. He phoned and he said, I'm taking Nisa to LA. We're going underground. You'll never see him again. And so, of course, my head exploded. And the one part of my brain went into full gear, and I found a friend to get a car, and we phoned the police. And that part was moving very quickly. But on the other side of my head, that little voice dropped in. And now I wonder if it was Babaji, because a film played in my head, and it was of Babaji's kidnapping. And I don't know if some of you are aware of this, but Babaji was kidnapped from a temple when he was about 5. He was in a Brahmin family, and he was sold into slavery. So he vanished from his family. But the man who bought him, I guess he had him as a houseboy, he was inspired very quickly to give him his freedom, and he did. So Babaji joined a group of wandering sadhus, and by the time he was, barely a teenager, they say he was teaching the Upanishads. The profound wisdom coming out of him was immense, and he attained, full realization and immortality when he was a teenager, which is why he appears as a teenager, because that's when his aging stopped. And so this film played in my head while this chaos was going on around me. And then the voice said, he doesn't belong to you. And it just hit me. And I thought, he's yours. He doesn't belong to me. And so in my head, I'm having this conversation while I'm jumping in a car and screaming down the highway. And I said, I understand. If you bring him back, I will take care of him as long as you want me to. And when it's time for him to leave, I will let him go. Within 2 hours, my son was back. And it makes me wonder how many kidnappings are this kind of lesson, are this kind of jolt for the family involved to shift their perception of how they're raising their child or how they're holding on to their child. I know that if I hadn't given him up back to the divine, that he probably never would have come home. I probably never would have seen him again. And the fact that the lesson was so fast and so profound made me realize that this is all the divine is trying to do, is get our attention. And you look at the pandemic right now, and it's worldwide. The whole world is being shaken to get its priorities right, to be on that date with the divine as a priority. And then you will move through these other events very quickly, because you're letting, Guruji drive. You're letting the one that knows, that can see the highway, you're letting that one drive and take you to the destination. And as Guruji said, surrender comes in many phases. So you start small. And I had massive events happen, and I'm hoping you don't have to go through that kind of trauma. I think if you pay attention now and let those little hints that even say, turn off this highway here, and you find out later you avoided a huge car crash by turning there. if you just start developing that intuition and always letting it be the guidance, always let it be um, the advice you follow. And sometimes you'll get that inspiration, and then people will show up to help you fulfill that destiny. And that's perfect. I'm not saying ignore people, just listen for the divine, because the divine does come through people to help you. But it's knowing the difference. And the more you practice it, what you'll feel is when people ask me, what's the difference between that divine whisper and my mind? Well, the mind, if you'll notice, goes round and round, round and round like a hamster on a wheel, and it will solve the same problem 100 times a day. You know, the same problem will pop into your head. How am I going to pay that bill? And then you go, and you resolve it all day long, and you keep coming to the same conclusion, but you never go anywhere. Whereas when that voice from the divine drops in, it's very quiet and it's very still, and it's not saying much. You know, it will be like a yes, no, go right, do this. And when you hear it, you feel immense peace. And that's how you start discerning between that monkey mind and the divine. And you know, sometimes it will yell at you. Sometimes that voice, if it's a dangerous situation, you will get a yell at you. And that's okay too, because it will jolt you and get your attention if something is seriously going to happen. And I think in these times, we've been put in like the biggest video game that was ever created. Like what is going on right now is beyond human experience, I think. And that's why Guruji is pushing us so much to chant, because if you will still your mind, then those divine guidance little messages can be heard. But if you're chattering, I used to find I narrated my life, but I seem to make comments mentally about everything that was going on. I was like, oh, she looks nice today. Oh, that's a pretty sunset. Like I was talking to myself all the time, like I was narrating a film. And then I realized that I was getting crazier and crazier. So when I stopped it, I was able to appreciate what was going on, the beauty that was going on, without having to say anything. We don't have to be narrating our life all the time. And as Guruji said, a polluted mind cannot surrender, because it is the mind that must be surrendered. And so it will do its best to stop you. So there were times when I thought I was surrendered because my mind was telling me I was surrendered. And then an event would happen that would show me I wasn't. So this is where studying like the Guru Gita is about the guru-disciple relationship. And Guruji's commentary on it is beautiful. And it describes how to relate to the divine in a way that helps you in your daily life. And, you know, some of us are too busy to sit and do much of a practice. And if you're just feeling connected all day, then that's your practice. If you are constantly feeling that intense love inside of you and spreading it to people, you know, you can walk through a shopping mall and just smile at people and just visualize love going out to them. And you'll see amazing things happen. Like people we're all connected at that subtle level. And when people feel a loving being go past them, you can see them just perk up and feel better. And I witnessed that going into the prison, working with kids. And before the lockdown, I had started going into the women's prison. And I was with a lot of First Nations women who had been abused. And these poor souls were just broken. And I went in and I smiled and we chatted, and then we chanted Om. And afterwards, they were just beaming. So that whole idea of being selfless, of getting rid of your ego, and when you're given a gift by the divine, thinking, how can I use this to help somebody else? Right? The more you let yourself be that vehicle, empty bamboo is one of the analogies. If you're empty bamboo, then that divine energy can just be flowing through you all the time. And that way, you're always saying the right thing. You're always doing the right thing. And you're always giving someone what they truly need. And it goes both ways. It should always come from a place of love. But I have had women call me who want to just gossip and judge and rant and rave about people. And I've learned to just stop them and say, I am not going to have this conversation with you. And the reaction's hilarious because you can see them thinking, well, of course you have to have this conversation with me. I phoned you. And the fact is, you don't have to participate. And by saying that to somebody, you will actually help them. If you say to them, I don't want to have this type of conversation, they have to look at themselves and think, well, what am I saying that's upsetting her? Right? So sometimes it means being stern with people and just setting the boundaries, saying what you will and won't allow into your life. And that's Guruji. That's the divine going, this will help, this won't. Maybe you have to cut this person out of your life now, and then you can let them in later when they shift. And Guruji does that constantly. People come, go, and he's never judging them. He's never cutting them out of his mission. He knows everybody has to go through their stuff. And one way to look at it is when you were a child, you pretty much surrendered to your parents, right? Whatever they said made sense. They provided everything for you. You were surrendered to them. And then, of course, as a teenager, you rebel and don't want to hear from them, don't want them to tell you what to do. And that's a healthy part of human existence. We are supposed to separate from our parents and become individuals. But I think that's what holds some people back with the idea of surrendering to a guru, because they, walked away from their parents' control, and you can see them thinking, why would I let any adult take over my control? But this is the one that created you. So try to keep it clear what is you just advancing as a human, but there's no hidden motive behind the guru, the divine, whatever visual you connect with. The one that you feel that intense love for will never harm you. And even though you may be put into incredibly intense situations, those situations are needed because you are paying off your karma. And something that I realized big time in India was when I really started to understand karma, it is more immense than we can imagine. And when you read the ancient Vedas, every bug you have killed now has the right to evolve to a human and kill you. And when I heard that, I thought, how do you ever get out from under that kind of karma? Like, how do you ever resolve that massive karma? And the fact is, as humans, we can't on our own. And that's why you find the guru, because the gurus wipe away karma, or they make it smaller so you can deal with it. And you'll see a lot of people, once they get around the guru, they'll have these wacky accidents, they'll break a foot or they'll hit their head. And this is a small price that you're paying instead of a violent death. And I remember a beautiful story about Babaji, that he was sitting with some of his disciples around a fire one night. And suddenly he grabbed one of the disciples' hands and jammed it into the fire and burned it. And so, of course, everyone just immediately thought their guru was a jerk. And they're all like, oh my God, what have you done? And Babaji just looked at them and said, would you rather he die a violent death? I just removed that. So this is where the trust in the guru is so important, because he knows there is a price to be paid. And if an accident like burning a hand is all you have to pay instead of dying violently, then take it. Just stop whining and take whatever is handed out to you once you're under the care of a guru, because they're the only one who can see that huge bank account of karma that we have to plow through. And it's like, through life, these lessons are brought to us to resolve, and we keep running away from them. It's like you've decided you're going to jump off the high diving board, and you climb up to the very top and look over the edge and change your mind and go back down. Lifetime after lifetime, you keep not jumping off the diving board. So the guru is the one who will walk up to the high platform with you and push you off. And it may seem like, but when you hit the water and come up, the exhilaration is amazing. Like when you let them push you through that karma, you realize why you need a guru, because we don't have the strength to face some of these challenges alone. We chicken out, it's too scary, it's too much. But when you let them push you off that diving board, you begin to live a life of mythical proportions. And we were all born to live lives of mythical proportions, not tiny little wacky lives where we're busy looking for the plastic toy in a cereal box, and the guru's got a mountain of gold he's trying to give you, but you're focused on this little toy from the cereal box. We can't fathom what is waiting for us. And that's why you surrender. That's why you make your mind stop when it comes to planning your future. Let your mind, remind you what your family's names are. Like there's a logical reason for a mind, because it is a tool. It's a tool to help you with life, but you are allowed to turn it off. And when you turn it off, that's when the divine guidance drops in. And how many scientists have said that their inventions, their inspiration came from somewhere else? Einstein, Tesla, they all talk about how they don't feel responsible for their discoveries because of the way the information landed complete, just full, ready to go. So, as all the great teachers say, be as a child, be happy and playful and loving, and trust. Just trust that the divine is there to help you, to guide you. And even in the scariest times, it's still going to turn out all right. It's still a grand adventure, and it will be okay. And one of my favorite quotes is actually, I put it in my memoir, and it's from a French poet at the turn of the century, Apollinaire. And it says, "Come to the edge," he said. And they said, "We are afraid." "Come to the edge," he said. They came, he pushed them, and they flew. So this is what I want for all of us, is to fly. Jai Gurudev.
Om Namo Narayanaya. Om Namo Narayanaya. Om Namo Narayanaya. Om Namo Narayanaya.